What did I do?
Hi.
Hi, Cher. How are you?
Good, 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 good. Just getting in so we can run through everything real quick.
Sure.
It says that you've stopped video for me.
Oh, yeah, you know what? Sorry. I need to make you a co-host. There you go.
Great. And will I be able to share?
Yeah, you should be able to share now if you want to try.
Okay, great. And then I'm going to test a few adjustments on my mic so that you can tell me where my voice sounds best.
Absolutely.
Warmth-wise. And let me get on your, there I am. Good
Hey,
morning.
Cher. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm really thrilled to be here today. Do you know how many people we're going to have?
Well, I'll tell you, at this point, we have 480 registered.
Okay.
And I think normal patterns going with attritions and stuff, things like that. My guess is we're going to see a crowd of around 200.
Okay. And then usually with the workshops, we get 50 or 60 people, and after that, it gets a little crazy. So we may do a format where we choose some volunteers who are key leaders who will be the representatives of the workshop, and then everyone will vote on each piece of it, so they'll still participate.
Oh, so I need to bring people in from this? Okay, go. This is a webinar.
You have me for 2 hours, right? Or 1 hour?
I think it was 1 hour.
Okay, good. Then we're good.
Okay.
I thought we were doing the 2 hour, and she had sent me a note saying from noon to 2, or actually from 1 to 3 your time, but I thought it was only 1 hour.
If I screwed up, I apologize. I think I only have, historically, our webinars are 1 hour, so that's kind of what I assumed.
Okay.
If I missed something, I do apologize. And if you want to, I guess, find people, we can try to work on that somehow. You know, I'm sure you're familiar with the Zoom platforms, et cetera. At least the way we have it set up is that We have it in kind of like watch mode where people can attend and ask questions, but we don't have a chat function per se. We've
Okay,
turned that
so,
off.
okay, then let's do this. Let's plan on the 1 hour. And if there is a workshop component desired, we will recreate that another time. Everybody's expecting 1 hour. And if you've got it set up as a webinar, it's going to be really challenging for you to change it now.
Yeah. Yeah. And if I, again, and I'm happy to reschedule that and make it more like a meeting workshop thing. Now,
Okay.
what I can do and what I've done before is that, we can go through and I can randomly pick people who are attendees and make them panelists so that they could interact with you if you want me to do that. But I wouldn't know who's who. I'm just picking names randomly from a hat. And that's how it goes. Let me text somebody really quickly.
Yeah, and because alternatively, I'm happy to do the workshop as a separate standalone piece for anybody that's already attended this 1 hour. So
Okay.
it's not a big deal to me. Because it's virtual, it's really easy for me to plug in times.
Well, what I can also do is, I'll have a list not only of the registrants, but the people who actually attended. And
Okay.
so if we wanted to send them a separate email saying, following up with a separate workshop, let's work on that. We could do that.
Okay, I guess if we want to talk with, I have to look and see who I have so many of these booked right now. It's insane. Maryland. Who is our contact?
Over here,
Yeah.
you've been working with Lori Benner, who's going to show up here.
Lori, thank you.
Yeah.
I have 5 Kristens or Kristas, and it's
Uh,
just been, and I'm stuck on that name. Okay, so let me make sure that right now, are you hearing me well?
yeah, you sound great. You look great. You sound great. I can see
Thank
everything.
you, thank you. And is my voice high? Because I tend to talk in a higher tone, so I try to add a little bass to the
I
microphone.
think you sound perfect. It's very clear,
Okay,
precise.
okay, so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen just so we can make sure that function is happening. And then when I'm sharing, will I be a little talking head or will it just be the slide?
You will be a little talking head.
Okay.
And my camera will be off. And
Okay.
Lori, what's going to happen? Actually, I'll go over some of the format here. Lori's going to come on board. She'll probably come in about 15 minutes or so. She's going to introduce you to the audience.
Okay.
I'll start the webinar and then I'm going to introduce her. She's going to introduce you to the audience. I am going to then turn her off, make her an audience member so she doesn't appear up in our panel of talking heads. And then toward the end, I was going to bring her back on to help accommodate Q&A if you wanted that.
Okay. Yes, that's great as well. I guess we need to talk with her and see, because and this is bad on my part, and I apologize to you. In the way that you had sent it, I just assumed we were in the Zoom format, but with
Yep.
this many attendees.
Yeah.
So I apologize to you.
Oh, no worries, no worries. Yeah, I think this will be good. And this will be a nice 1 hour presentation, etc. So, well, and actually, I've just been texting Lori, so she should be showing up here any minute now.
Okay.
But your slides look good, although it's not in slide mode.
Yeah, I left it because then I have to go through but I'll put it in and you just, so you've got full format now?
Yeah, it looks great. Now, can you forward me these slides? Because people like to have them after the fact.
I can't because the graphics, I have paid for them, but I've had an issue with people sharing them and the licensing doesn't allow it.
All
So
right.
I have to fix that. And I have a student template that I was told I couldn't use, which I'm pretty frustrated about, with some of the photos. So I have to swap them out. And you had asked me a couple days ago, and I'm still waiting for them to tell me what the fee is for me to just be able to share all of them, but they haven't told me. So I probably will be sharing them after the fact, just because I don't want somebody to sue me.
No, 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 we don't want you to be sued.
Yeah.
That's never fun. But
And
I guess the format generally is this, is that next week we're going to record this webinar. We're recording right now.
right.
And we're going to post this on our YouTube channel. And then I send an email to everybody who registered, whether they attended or not, the link to the webinar. And I always say if, because not every presenter provides a slide deck. So you are not obligated to share your slides with us. If they do, then I post them on our website and I share a link to those slides as well. Because people do like them. And if you do have a version that you want to share and you can get it to me next week, then I'll definitely include it in the webinar that we have.
Yeah, I had shared them with someone, and they posted and then used it to teach another class, and I ended up having an issue with somebody who did some of the graphics, and so I don't even know how they found out about it, but it just created a little bit of a, okay, tell me what I can and can't do. Let's, if there's a fee that needs to be paid, give me the license that I need to have so that I don't have to worry about this, because I can't control what happens with it after it leaves my hands. It's just not realistic that you can pull it back. So
it's whatever you want to do or choose to do. It's no worries on our end, and we're totally cool with that. Lori, I see you're here. Are you there? Are you logged in?
I am here. Yeah, I'm not allowed to start my video though.
Oh, I can help you with that.
I've been prohibited.
Hi, Lori.
So I don't blame you. How are you?
Good.
All right, now you can turn your camera on. There you go.
Here I am.
Oh, and you got your Christmas tree up. How nice.
Well, one of them.
Okay.
Oh, wow.
Well, I got none of mine up, so there you go.
I know, I have a big fat 0 too.
I just thought that was a nice space right there. I got one of those little pencil trees. I haven't decorated it yet, but I thought it looked nice there.
Oh, it looks great, just lit like that. I love it. Very sleek and sophisticated.
Yeah, and then this on the other side, it lights up, but it created this weird glare, so I shut it off. But
it just looks like a festive triangle from here, but I like it.
Yeah, I'll go for that. So basically, when we kick it off, I guess, Dan, you're going to say whatever it is you're going to say. I was going to, welcome to our webinar. I was going to read Cher's bio and then mention about, in the spirit of how we like to promote Realtor Good Deeds. I was going to touch briefly on the fact that her speaker fees for these presentations goes towards a charitable cause, and just
that's wonderful. That's great.
Say a couple sentences on that and then turn it over to Cher.
You might want to say at the end to Lori, before you log off, is that you'll pop back up to help facilitate Q&A towards the end of this.
Okay.
And maybe about 1:40, 1:45, I'll just bring you back on and Cher, just continue to do what you do. You don't have to rush or anything. And then, whenever you're ready, we'll try to field questions for you.
I'll, whenever it is you bring me back, I'll leave my camera off at that time. But yeah, like you said, at the end of my statement, I'll say, that we'll be addressing questions at the end, so please feel free to put them in the Q&A box.
You don't want me to watch you eat cookies on screen?
My leftover Chipotle.
So a couple questions, Lori. Dan and I were talking, and he was thinking this was 1 hour, and I was thinking it was 2 hours. What are we doing?
So maybe this was a miscommunication. I was angling for the 1 hour.
Okay.
Because I know you said the more extended one has an element of participation and breakout sessions, but with the very large number of people that we're likely to have on this, I think that's just kind of undoable for breakout rooms if we end up having a couple hundred people.
Okay, great. So we're doing the 1 hour, that's perfect. And so at approximately, if we start on time, which are you really a good stickler on time and all that?
What will happen is, what is it time? It's like about 12:43 right now. We'll move over around 12:58 and people will start jumping on quickly. But I generally give it, just a couple minutes just to get a little bit more of a crowd there.
Okay.
And so like 102, 103, then I'll just kind of say, I'll do some housekeeping notes and then I'll turn it over to Lori and we'll begin. And speaking of sticklers for time, if this goes over by 5 minutes, 10 minutes, it's not a big deal. We don't turn off the spigot right at 2 o'clock or anything like that.
Okay.
Generally what you'll notice though is that, audience participation starts really, diving, at certain points. But I think if this is, I think this will sustain people. And if you need to go over, don't worry, it'll all be good and we'll all look forward to it.
Okay, so I have it timed at 52 minutes. And then if we do Q&A with Lori, having a little intro at the front, it may go over a little. If people have questions, and I'm happy to stay as long as people are engaged, and sometimes they'll ask a question about some behavior they have, and it's really interesting. I love it when people tell on themselves and kind of say, well, I do this. How do I not do this? And so people tend to listen if there's those kinds of questions. And then I've also had, and this is something I wanted to mention, I have had people, especially at the state level, this was for Illinois in particular, where someone came on and had a laundry list of why they thought the way that they did. And it was, of course, contradictory to inclusiveness. And so that had to be shut off in a hurry. And with questions, I'm assuming in this format, they'll send you a question and you're going to read it, or are you going to put them on screen?
No,
we generally, I'm sorry, go ahead, Lori.
Oh, sorry. No, yeah, we're gonna moderate. So we'll look at the questions coming in and then pose them. That typically works best just to weed out some of the situations like you were talking about, but also because there tends to be a lot of duplicate questions. So we can just, condense and weed out anything that's ridiculous or offensive.
Yeah, and while the webinar is going on, I'm going to get rid of all the superfluous questions like, is there a slide deck? No. Will this webinar be recorded? Yes. Stuff like that.
Yeah, you'll get a dozen of those, even though we say it, twice at the beginning.
Exactly.
Okay.
So I'll do that, and that way, hopefully, all that there is left are good, honest questions that we can answer, or have you answer, I should say.
Perfect.
And I have to tell you, Cher, before we start, so I watched this presentation, I believe, when you did it for the Raleigh Realtors. And one of the things that I took from it and that I've been telling people is, in a paraphrasing, you had mentioned something about when facilitating like a committee meeting or a meeting, to basically ask, is there anyone here who has a different viewpoint? Because
Right.
we want to make sure that we, consider all perspectives. And I thought that that was absolutely a brilliant way to draw out those people who, don't feel like they want to be ganged up on, or, I oppose this, but everybody else in the room doesn't seem to, so I'm just going to stay quiet.
Good. Well, thank you. That cheered me. I love that I'm, I want it to be useful and simple. It's and non-judgmental, so that people actually will tune in and not tune out. So hopefully that happens today. And was there anything that has happened in your neck of the woods that you think needs to be mentioned? Anything socially or politically? I will mention NAR's shift with the code of ethics.
Good.
That's kind of a new piece. And how
we've had some, I didn't mean to cut you, I'm sorry to interrupt you there.
You're okay.
We've had some situations where, and I think this, it kind of goes back to what you just talked about with the NAR stuff, where people on their own private accounts may say stuff or share stuff that wouldn't be welcome in a professional environment. And that coming back to, potentially, obviously reflecting negatively on that person as a realtor, but also reflecting negatively on the local association that person comes from. So, I think that, I don't know if you can add anything better to that, Lori, but that's about it.
No, I don't think you would be surprised by any of the comments or the pushback that we've gotten on the things that we've done. And largely, it doesn't tend to be a question or a thoughtful exchange. It's just, for example, we had I think it was our race in real estate panel. We had a member reach out and say, well, why are you sending this to me? I already took my fair housing credit.
Yeah, I remember that one.
It's like, oh, okay, yeah. Cool.
We set up Juneteenth as a holiday. Somebody emailed me and said that they were offended by that. It's like, really? So what are you going to do?
And I think, and I'd love it, Lori, since you've seen this once before, I'd love it if you tell me if anything stands out differently in terms of a new nugget that comes up, or hearing it the second time, if it makes a difference. I try to keep it refreshed with everything that's going on in the world, and in our world in particular. But some of it is so repetitive, and a lot, because I was on the board for NAR and I got to participate in that entire discussion on the COE. And a lot of the pushback, what I understood was people didn't see themselves as racist, but they felt concerned that they couldn't express an opinion without being attacked. And a lot of it was from Christians. And what's interesting about that is Christians are also a protected class. So we really need to see that evolve. And my answer when people have approached me is, if you see anything happen, if you're seeing anything that reflects unfair treatment toward you as a Christian and what you believe, where you're not insulting other people, but you're expressing an opinion and a belief, then let me know, because we will protect and fight for you just like we would fight for any other protected class. So I think a lot of people just want to be heard and not feel that they run the risk, which I don't know why anybody would put a post about homosexuals going to hell, or, that, which is usually either that or same-sex marriage, or gender restroom battles, those are the ones they're worried about mostly when I pry. And I won't go into depth here because I don't think it'll be valuable, but if we have a question along the lines of that topic of religious freedom, I'm happy to say, as a realtor, do you not want to work with a protected class? And if you've agreed to not discriminate, how will you not discriminate if you won't work with same-sex marriage people? How does that tie into your religion? It's not an answer, but it is a question that needs to be asked, because it's really the relevant challenge. And I see the dichotomy. I have a lot of faith myself. It just doesn't go to not loving somebody. So anyway,
yeah,
I don't know if that's
works for me. That sounds good. Yeah.
On it, but anyway. Okay.
Yeah, it's been interesting. In my past, I've worked for nonprofits for many, many years, and the organizations I've worked for, pretty much everyone who worked there has always been very socially and politically aligned. So when I came to the realtor, organization, it took a bit of an adjustment, realizing just how broad the perspective. It's really just from one far end to the other.
Right.
So having to think about that, and to really meet people where they are in this stuff. In our DEI efforts, there's of course people who have lived with, facing discrimination for their entire lives. And then there are people who kind of just deny that it even exists.
Right.
And there are people who are just now coming to it. I mean, I remember being at, I think it was mid-year in 2018, when they did the big presentation about the 50th anniversary of the Fair Housing Act. And they put right up there on that big screen about how, something about, I guess, how realtors were specifically, it might have even said, Negroes are not allowed to be members or something along those lines. And a gasp went up in the room. I mean, people were shocked. And I thought, how can you be shocked by that? Like, but they didn't even know it was a thing. So I try to recognize that there are people who are just now coming to this and just now learning about some of these issues.
Well, and a lot of it is just blinders because it's not relevant to their experience, and it's not an insult, and it's not meant to be a lack of compassion. It's just simply they're not aware because it's not relevant to them. And we're all busy living our lives and facing our own challenges. And that hasn't been one until we've been, and now it looks like everybody's getting their beaten over the head with it, but it's really just a shock of awareness, like you said. There's also been a lot of discussion, and I don't know if this has happened in your association, but where the discussion is to do away with the prayer at the beginning of board meetings or luncheons, and the concern that, if somebody prays a Christian prayer, then it's going to insult everyone who's agnostic or Muslim or Jewish or whatever. And my suggestion is always to go to a format to make sure that every month, if it's a board meeting, for example, that you're going to feature a different religion or a moment of silence or a poem or an affirmation or whatever the person, but just making sure that it includes, find out what everybody is focused on spiritually in the board, or if they want to share or not, and have them sign up and make sure that it's just all of it instead of saying we will do none of it. Then inclusiveness isn't doing away with what people believe or feel. Inclusiveness is finding a way to include everyone and respect all the points of view. So that's been helpful for a lot of associations, just in understanding we're not trying to get rid of prayer. What we're trying to do is make sure that people who don't pray and who want to share their Muslim belief or their Jewish belief, or, if they're a yogi, I mean, whatever that, breathing, or, there's so many people, but, and I think it just gives that freedom. Instead of saying, well, we're going to just whitewash everything, we want to include people the way they are, not be politically correct to the point where we're all homogenized and have no permission to express our true selves, which is not inclusion.
Yeah, that's never really been an issue for us. So I've been with the association for over 6 years now, and we've never opened meetings or events with prayer. So it's never really been an issue. There's been some, I want to say maybe occasionally, maybe a incoming president may want to kick off their installation or include some type of a prayer before the meal, but it's always been, very, very brief, very kind of non-denominational, very, kind of vanilla. So to my knowledge, it's never, ever been an issue for us.
Good. Well, that's good to hear. So if you need me or you want me to address something, you can text me. I use my phone as my timer. And so I'll also see if you have a text come up.
What's your phone number in case I need to text you something technically about the event?
430-6861.
What was the area code?
615.
615. Okie dokie. Well, we're getting close to the time. Any last minute things on your end, Cher, that you want clarification on, or?
No, I feel pretty good and ready to go and
All right.
excited to share.
Well, break a metaphorical leg. That's all I'll say.
Well, thank you.
All right. I'm going to wait a couple more minutes. Then we'll turn on at 1. Then we'll just wait. But get some of the crowd. Oh, that's what I wanted to check.
So Cher, I'm looking over the sheet that you sent about the scholarship. Is this for, it looks like it's a scholarship for seniors, a college scholarship for seniors?
Rising seniors who are, I think I sent you the Tennessee Realtor one for the small local associations, didn't I?
Yes.
Okay, so I made a mistake on that. I have another sheet.
I was just basically going to say that, that your speaker fees go to the Tennessee Real Estate Education Foundation, which benefits rising seniors.
Who are dependents, they have to be dependents of realtors.
Of realtors, okay.
With financial need, and they have to have minimum scholastic standards, but maybe that's too much to say. So.
All right, I got to start. We're going to start now. So sorry to interrupt you folks. Hello, friends. This is Dan Petrell with Maryland Realtors. We will begin this webinar shortly. We just want to wait a minute or so to let more people flock in. We got 100 and we're getting more and more people here. So just give us a minute and we'll start shortly. You know, we got 121 people in here. I think that's a good starting time. I am going to turn this over to our colleague, my colleague, Lori Benner, Director of Housing Programs here at Maryland Realtors, to introduce our guest and today's topic. Lori.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on our Thursday webinar series. I am absolutely thrilled to introduce you to today's instructor, and I'll read you her bio. Cher Powers with from Tennessee. So as an educator, Cher has written and presented programming on real estate investing, renovation, and retirement planning for local, state, and national classrooms and conventions. She was one of the subject matter experts who created the 2018 National Association of Realtors REBAC course on real estate investing. Cher wrote this webinar, The Umbrella Effect, Building an Unstoppable Inclusive Culture, in response to local presidents and AE attendee feedback at the Tennessee Realtors think tank led by Diversity Inclusion Committee. She is the 2019-2020 Division II Vice President for Tennessee Realtors, serves as a chair of the Local Leadership Idea Exchange Council for National Association of Realtors, and is the managing broker of Urban Residential Specialist. She is an active advocate and President Circle Golden R Major Investor Hall of Fame member. So wow, that was a lot. And I would like to, before we begin, mention, because we love to promote our realtor community service and good deeds, that all of the speaker fees that Cher gets for presenting this webinar, as she has done for many associations across the country, goes to the Tennessee Real Estate Education Foundation, which is an organization that benefits rising seniors who are dependents of realtors have, you know, scholastic financial need and are scholastically outstanding. So we appreciate her doing that and working towards her goal of $20,000 generated for the fund. So thank you so much for that share. And without further ado, we will turn it over to you to get started. Looking forward to it.
Thank you, Lori, and thank you, Dan, for your help this morning. And hello, Maryland Realtors. Really honored and excited to be here this afternoon. It's still slightly morning for me in Nashville, Tennessee. We just hit noon, but we are going to have a very fast-paced hour, and we'll start this show and give you an opportunity to learn about the umbrella effect. So, what is the umbrella effect? Well, when we build an unstoppable, inclusive culture, the goal is to bring everyone along and to remind us that we're not looking to whitewash or create a plain vanilla world where everything is unacceptable to say. But a lot of us get stuck in, how do you have difficult conversations? How do you bridge that gap when you don't know what to say or what to do to be inclusive? And that's what today is about. This will go very quickly. We'll have 3 tools you can use with a couple bonuses in there. And my expectation and goal for this hour is for you to leave this webinar with an opportunity to utilize those tools immediately as you go about your business of being a realtor and in your communities and in your families. So I'm Cher Powers, and I am in Tennessee, as I mentioned. And a lot of us have gone through fair housing classes. We've done At Home with Diversity. We've attempted to understand the code of ethics and our obligation to treat everyone who is in a protected class without discrimination. And of course, the code of ethics has added the LGBT community in terms of protected class for our code of ethics, although they are not in the fair housing guidelines as of now at the national level federally. So when we're talking about fair housing and what that means, we've certainly had a big discussion just recently regarding our code of ethics and why we have needed to say the board of directors and the professional standards committee said, you know what, we really need to extend realtor behavior beyond just what they're doing as they're working, so that we can have some tools when people are being discriminatory that we can address it. So what kinds of things are they talking about, and where do we go as realtors who probably don't even believe, many of us, that we are discriminatory in our behavior? So we're going to start with a simple question. Does expanding diversity create inclusiveness? Well, when we ask that question, the real answer is quota was the effort by our government during civil rights period, and it exists even today. And it started with businesses and schools with an attempt to right the inequities that existed in jobs and in education. What happened, though, as you can see from this chart, is that increasing diversity did not create inclusiveness. It did improve numbers. It did create quota goals that could be met and measured, but it didn't create an inclusive group of people that liked and wanted to work together. And the reason is, as you increase diversity, there creates small pockets of polarization. People feel alienated, and of course, isolation and division result. So quota in itself and increasing diversity doesn't solve the issue of everyone feeling welcome and invited to the table, or that they have an equitable opportunity either in housing or in life. So why? Why does that happen? Well, it's all about unconscious bias, and most people would say, I'm not biased, I'm not racist. There are some people who proudly wear that badge, But I'm assuming if you're on this call or this webinar today, that's really not an issue for you. But the question really is, are you biased? And does unconscious bias exist? Well, the short answer is, if you're living and breathing, you are biased. And the reason that you're biased and that there is unconscious bias is that it's a survival mechanism that we all have. We have had it since humans have walked on this earth, and probably when we were crawling. But that if we were walking down the road, for example, and you see a tiger and it's walking towards you or laying in the road, your immediate reaction would be unconscious. You would see danger and you would look around for a way to protect yourself, and it would either be fight, flight, or freeze, depending on your personality and your skill set. And also your knowledge of tigers. For example, if you knew if you started running that a tiger would chase you, you might freeze, or you might pick up something to make yourself bigger in order to ward off the threat of the tiger. But your biases, that unconscious bias, is always operating to say, is this safe? Is it unsafe? Do I like it? Do I not like it? And it's operating like a mini computer, and it's making decisions before you're even aware that it has. And as we go through today, you'll see examples of this in different aspects of how we interact with each other. So the answer is yes, we are all biased. Welcome to the human race, but it can be good or bad. And if we find that an unconscious bias that we're operating with is actually creating a situation that's not acceptable to us, or that we weren't aware of and we want to change, we bring it to consciousness, and then we can make a decision about whether we want to create change or not in our own lives. So I've got a lot of ugly words up on the screen right now. Labeling is a way that our unconscious bias operates to create safe, not safe, known, unknown, good, bad, etc. And it happens without us even being aware of it. But the labeling is what happens in society as groups of people start labeling those things that were unconscious into a conscious realm. And I'll give you an example of something that is very recent, which is women. If there's anyone on here whose name is Karen, I am really sad for you right now, because Karen has become an insult in our society right now. When we share it, we become insulting, and we carry on that communication that women who react a certain way can be labeled, therefore we now know they're all bad. Well, if we chose to not label and we said Karen instead of Karen, or instead of snowflake, or instead of a deplorable, for example, within our political arena, if we took away those labels and we started focusing on the individual behavior, we would then be able to have a conversation. As soon as we label someone or something, they understand, just like we do, if you're on either side of the political spectrum, either you're deplorable or a snowflake. If you hear that label, you already have assumptions about the person making that statement, that they're not interested in your point of view, and that they are only interested in finding fault in what you think. Now, to avoid that shutting off of conversation, taking labels off the table, whether it's in social media, in conversation, every time we catch ourselves using a label, we are saying, I've made a decision about this, and you can say nothing that will change my mind. You are not, I've put you in a box, and you don't need to move because I understand everything I need to know about you. And we've seen this a lot on social media, and it's been quite heartbreaking, I think, for people who don't want to be divided from half of the population. And this is the way that we stop that process, is we refuse to label people, so we can continue to have a conversation and hear their point of view and understand more about what they're thinking. So in order to stop labeling people, what do we need to do? I think for me, this has been the most powerful tool, is having compassion and understanding. And so I'm going to ask you, just watching, if you've ever in your life felt marginalized. Have you ever had a moment when you felt less than, when somebody judged you, labeled you, or made you feel irrelevant or unvalued? Could be in school, it could be socially, you weren't invited to a party or an event that was important to you. You were not introduced to the rest of the group, to someone that you really wanted to meet. Family, some people are labeled as the black sheep of the family. At work, you didn't get a promotion or recognition for an idea. Sports, being picked last or not at all for a team. If you can see any of these or your own example and remember that emotion as we go through the rest of this program today, marginalization is when anyone feels less than. And if we start with that understanding that if we're going to be inclusive, it is important that no one feels less than, including people we don't like. How do we do that? Where do we start? And how do we have conversations that facilitate that? Well, if you haven't heard about the Long Island Divided study, it was an undercover study that took almost 3 years that Newsday did, where they went in and they tested realtors. But instead of testing each realtor once, which is the typical mode that our real estate commissions typically do, or fair housing does, they did a double blind where they had 2 people, one person of color or a minority, the other person was white. They both came into the same realtor within less than a month apart with the same criteria. They had the same budget, the same down payment, the same type of job, and the interest in almost an identical house, 3-bedroom, 2-bath, near something. Without exception, with 2 exceptions, all firms that were tested and every single realtor at those firms who were tested failed to treat both of the people the same. The most interesting thing about that study is that the person who was discriminated against did not realize it until they were both presenting their videos for the same realtor who they went in to meet. The person who was white, who had asked for the 3-bedroom, 2-bath, was invited into a car and to go out and look at property as soon as they selected some to see. The person of color or the minority was asked to provide ID and proof of funds before the realtor would start that search. This is an example of unconscious bias. The realtor wasn't aware that they had treated the people differently, but their unconscious bias made them feel safer and more trusting of one person than another. And this is an example of where if we do not treat every single client or customer that we interact with exactly the same, you're going to ask one person for proof of ID, everyone, not even if it's a multi-million-dollar purchase. If you're going to ask one person for proof of funds or a bank letter or a pre-qual or whatever your market allows, then in that same vein, no matter who the person is or what they look like, you would ask the other person as well. If you haven't seen that study, it takes about 3 hours to go through it. There are some wonderful videos, lots of information. It will really open your eyes to how easy it is to fall prey to this. And I would argue, no matter where you are in the country, and I certainly think if that test had been done in Nashville, we would have had similar results, because it's all about the unconscious and ways that we treat people differently that's very subtle as opposed to outright bias or discrimination. So how do we solve this? How do we tackle our unconscious bias and take steps to make some changes if we wish to do that? Well, it starts with emotional intelligence. And the wonderful thing about emotional intelligence, unlike IQ, Emotional intelligence is actually, according to studies from many universities across the country and the world, it is a better measurement of how successful you will be in your business, professional life, your family life, and in social life in general. And the reason for this is emotional intelligence is how you interact with yourself and understand yourself, and how you interact with other people. The good news, you can improve your emotional intelligence. It's also called EQ. So emotional intelligence has 4 components. The first is self-awareness. Who are you? How aware are you of what you like and don't like, how you behave? What are the things that you notice about yourself? How aware? The second piece of that is also internal. How do you manage yourself and how do you motivate yourself? When you are upset, can you control your temper? Do you have patience? Are you considerate of other people even when you're in a hurry? How well do you manage yourself? And are you self-motivated, or do you need pressure in order to perform? Do you have to have deadlines? Were you a student who stayed up until 4 a.m. because your paper was due that day? How motivated are you? Do you operate out of reward? Do you operate out of fear of failure or punishment? Empathy. These next 2 pieces are outward. How do you interact with other people? And I mentioned this a little bit earlier when we were talking about marginalization, when you feel less than. Having empathy for other people, if you can put yourself in their shoes, if you can consider things from another person's point of view and have empathy for their thought process and experiences, there is an improvement that can be made with your emotional intelligence that will help you in being more inclusive. And then social skills, of course, include how do you interact with other people? How do you work within groups? Are you a team player? Do you understand how to lead in a way that's encouraging and uplifting and inspiring? And where do you need to improve? Again, emotional intelligence, or EQ, is completely within your power to improve. So first, empathy in action. If we think that we are unbiased, and if we think that we're a good person, but we don't actually take steps to be inclusive in an outward way, then we may be empathetic, but it really does no good for the people around us. So how are we going to be empathy in action? First, even our code of ethics includes the golden rule, and almost every religion on the planet includes some version of do unto others as you would have others do unto you. Very common. And when we're thinking about the golden rule, how do we show that in action? Well, if we want people to treat us with respect and courtesy and actually listen, then our tone and our body language, being present, and then also responding appropriately to another person's emotion. When we're present, this is an example of how we can be empathetic. When we're in a group again, in a circle of people, or if you're talking with someone and someone else comes in the room and you look away and you nod and smile, or you notice them and then you bring your eyes back to the person you're speaking with. Empathy in action would be saying simply, I'm sorry, I just got distracted, and I really intend to listen to what you have to say. Could you please repeat what you were saying? I want to hear every word. Acknowledging that you got distracted instead of both of you pretending that it didn't happen. We've had it happen to us. In fact, there are people that will stand right in front of you while you're talking and never once look at you in the face. They're looking over your shoulder in every direction, and it definitely feels marginalizing. And certainly not inclusive. They're not present in the conversation. If you catch yourself doing it, we all do it, simply acknowledge it and show that person in that moment that they're important and that our embarrassment is less important than how they feel. Responding appropriately to someone's emotion does not mean solving their problems, and it doesn't mean that we have to fix anything. All it means is simply saying, I hear you're really angry, or it sounds like you're really disappointed about that. And if you have time, ask them to tell you more. If you don't have time, or it's not an appropriate setting, it's fine to say, it sounds like you're really disappointed about that. Can we talk later today? I have a window at 3 o'clock, or can I call you after work and let me hear more about this? I want to give you the time it deserves. And then follow up and make that call. We don't have to fix people, and we certainly don't have to get buried in other people's emotions, especially those who are empaths and carry a lot of sensitivity toward how other people are feeling. This is going to be an ongoing process today. It is not a one size fits all, one moment fixes all. It's all of us have to actually process and then start taking steps if we really want to be more inclusive. So I'm going to mention the first of the 3 tools that I said we would cover today. The first is, of course, being curious. Tool number 1, be curious. If you slow down your thinking, and when you have an assumption, ask yourself a question. Am I accurate? Could there be another point of view? If I'm finding myself resisting and preparing for what I want to say as a rebuttal, instead of really listening to the person, could I be missing something here? And asking for opinions of others. Do you feel I shut you off? Do you think that I actually listen to you? Do you feel heard? People that are important in your life, start there and ask those questions, and be prepared, because a lot of times how we see ourselves and how other people experience us are not quite the same thing. Reflecting on outside influences. Think about people who make you feel special and valued, and watch what they do and really look at what is it that that person does that makes me feel valuable when I'm around them, and that they really appreciate me. And then look at how your behavior is. Just being curious, not so much judging and critical of yourself, but just, aha, here I am, X marks the spot, observational. And then here's another thing that will be a tell. Look at when you have decisions where you're favoring certain people or disregarding others. Why? Be curious about why you're giving some people more credibility than others. Is it justified? It could be. Or is it an unconscious bias that you have? Have you decided that one person has more valuable things to say than another? And are you correct? And when we talk about diversity, I want to make a point here that diversity is not just about race and ethnicity. It's not just about protected classes. We are all diverse. And if we start understanding that inclusiveness, wherever our resistance to inclusiveness is where we tend to be biased and where we tend to not include people, or we've cut them off and labeled them, even if we never say it, there is a psychic awareness, if you will, a sensitivity people have, and they know that you do not accept them and you judge them, or that you find them less than they are, that you think you're better than them. Some of this could be, I've got a list of things up here, but you could go much further. Right now, politics is a hot button. Disability and size is a hot button. Gender, of course, same-sex marriage, restroom, accessibility for different genders and how that all works. We have diversity that goes far, far beyond just the labels that we see. And of course, when we classify those labels, we need to, for fair housing, we need to for our code of ethics. But keep in mind that true inclusiveness is making every person feel welcome at the table. And again, I'm going to say, including people that you don't like. Key bias risk factors. The fastest way that we're going to rely on our unconscious bias, what triggers that, It's always when we're in high pressure, time pressure moments, we'll fall back on letting our brain, that computer behind the scenes, making all those decisions for us, judging, deciding what's good, what's bad, what's safe, what's not safe, what's familiar, or what's foreign. Distractions, if we're distracted and we're not paying attention to the person in front of us, if we're not treating people with respect, it's usually because we're running hard and we're distracted. And then of course, if we're super high or super low, we also run a risk of having unconscious bias operate for us. I want to encourage you though, and this is really a key piece, your bias, my bias, our bias does not always reflect our values, nor does it reflect the people's values that you come in contact with. Unconscious biases are exactly that. They're unconscious. And if we assume that everyone intends well, but might not always do well, and that a specific behavior does not measure who that human being is or what they're capable of, we can label the behavior and not label the person, then we're going to be much more inclusive and accepting. And we're also going to give people room to make mistakes and continue to improve. So the next step, once we've become curious, is our next tool, number 2, is to retrain our mind. So how do we do that? Well, we're going to create new experiences. If you always spend time with the same people in every setting, social setting, if you don't get to know people who are in your firm or who are on the board with you or who are in your local community, even some of your family members, create new experiences and get to know them. People that you resist, be curious and find out why. Retrain your mind to start creating those new experiences and giving people the opportunity to share who they are with you. Exposing yourself to counterexamples. If you have a harsh bias, if you have something, let's say you absolutely believe anyone who is whichever political party you are not, that party can never be your friend, you don't want to have anything to do with them, I would spend time talking with them and asking them how they came to some of the ideas that they had. Not to have a political discussion, but to understand their point of view. Very intelligent people are on both political parties. Very intelligent people have sound reasoning from their perspective on why they believe what they believe. Asking questions, creating new experiences, and exposing yourself to counterexamples. If you believe that all Muslims are terrorists, go to a mosque. Ask for an opportunity to sit in a class and learn more about that religion so that you have relationships with people who are different than you are. Creating counterexamples to specific biases that you uncover is going to be a very powerful tool in overcoming behavior that you weren't even aware that you were operating out of. So the other thing I want to encourage you to do is to take an implicit association test. These are provided free from universities and you will become part of the study, but you can do it anonymously. There are all kinds of implicit bias tests, from disabilities to politics to religion to obesity, ageism, and of course racism, and all kinds of biases. You can take tests. They're fun, they're interesting, but be prepared to be surprised at the aspects of your brain and how it operates that you might not even be aware of. You could then take the test 6 months later after you become more aware and see how you do. They're free and they're fascinating. So I mentioned giving yourself and others grace. I'm going to mention it again because I think it's so important when we're trying to overcome such a huge societal challenge to be more inclusive, to overcome unconscious biases that most of us aren't aware that we have. In fact, it's unconscious until we bring it to our consciousness. Giving ourselves grace and then giving other people around us grace. Assume the behavior needs fixing and not the person. Give them the benefit of the doubt. Be detached and non-judgmental about yourself. Acknowledge the behavior, apologize if you need to in the moment, and then move forward with a course of action so that you can improve in that area. Key bias triggers. I mentioned at the beginning that there are times when we are going to be triggered to have certain kind of biases, and some of them are good, some of them are bad. An affinity bias, that's that natural attraction we have for somebody who's very similar to us, believes what we do, has the same kind of energy, and we're just attracted to them. The challenge is when we have an affinity bias, we give them a pass, that free pass, when some of their behavior doesn't match up with what somebody else that we might not have an affinity for can't get away with in our minds. We have a judgment of those other people. Halo effect is when we put someone on pedestal. The challenge with that is everyone is human, and it is an unconscious bias that someone can do no wrong, and it puts them in a position of not being able to be human, and that is good or bad depending on if they fall from grace or not. Confirmation bias, this is what we're seeing on social media every day, where someone posts a very harsh point of view and they are not looking for anyone to share any information that could contradict their point of view or facts, because a lot of times it's not even accurate. All they're looking for people to do is to confirm what their opinion is. And when we're looking for confirmation bias, we are not looking to have a relationship with people and hear what they think or feel. We're just looking to feel better about our own point of view and our limited myopic position on a particular topic. Groupthink is dangerous. This is where we have rioting that starts from protests, where a small group of people start stirring up other people, sometimes deliberately and sometimes out of passion. And all of a sudden you have this big group of people doing something that they probably would never have done. For the most part, there's probably a few people in there who would, but the majority get drawn along into behavior that is contradictory to what they believe is right. And that happens through groupthink. It also happens in meetings when we are looking for people to confirm our point of view. So we share an idea as this is the right idea, rather than asking the question, okay, we have this idea on the table, and so far it looks like everyone is confirming that idea. Is there anyone who has an alternative point of view that might help us avoid an unintended consequence and help us have a very well-rounded discussion to make sure we're not missing anything? When we don't allow groupthink to control our meetings and our decisions, whether it's in a family or a board meeting or an office setting or even with clients, we start understanding that by inviting those alternative point of views, we avoid bias-driven thinking that limits the potential outcome. So when we're taking action, how are we going to do that? The third piece is recognizing individuality. If you recognize individuality, you will not label anyone. You do this by asking open-ended questions and rejecting oversimplistic conclusions, even if it would create, especially to avoid creating new biases. And you share your own biases. If you've had a judgment about someone or something, and it's the proper and correct way, position, timing to do it, it's okay to say, you know what? I didn't realize that I had a bias about this, and I've been working on it, and I now realize that I can be friends with both Republicans and Democrats, for example. So we're going to talk about meetings, because even if you're not in a key leadership group, if you're not in a volunteer group, you're still going to be having meetings probably every day, whether it's with your family, your spouse, in community settings with your friends. There's always going to be decision making that happens, whether it's a formal meeting or an informal meeting, in person or virtual. We always have opportunities to lead, whether we are the actual leader of the meeting, if it's a formal setting or not. Recognizing individuality, this is really key if you're chairing a committee, if you are CEO, if you're leading a group or a community organization, your parent to children, asking everyone to participate in the meeting and attributing contributions to the right person. When someone gives an idea, it's so important to say, Thank you, Mary, for that idea. Terrific. Let's say Mo interrupts Mary halfway through her point of view. She's sharing an idea, and Mo says, I've been thinking about that same thing, and here's what I think we should do. Even if you are not the leader of the meeting, if the leader fails to do it, or if it's in an informal setting, it's completely loving and appropriate to say, hey, Mo, wait just 1 second. I'm not sure Mary was finished, and I want to make sure I understand her idea before we go back to you so that we can hear what you think as well. This is a way to keep people on track, to recognize the original creator and not allow someone to hijack it before that person has finished their thought. Now, Mary may very well say, oh, I think that covered what I had to say and I like where Mo is going, but you've shown respect and you've acknowledged that Mo interrupted without shaming Mo or making him feel like he didn't contribute to the conversation. So there are ways to nurture positive and constructive relationships while still honoring the person who brought the idea to the table. Creating space for others, this is really key. Simple thing to do, doesn't require verbal interaction. If you're standing in a circle, when we're standing in a circle again, you can, someone walks up to the circle, and I know you've all experienced this where you walk up to a group and the circle doesn't open up and you're kind of standing there like a fifth wheel and it feels very awkward. If you are part of that circle, take 1 step back, even if you don't like the person, unless it's a private conversation, and then the appropriate thing to do is lean and say, hey, Jane, I really would like to welcome you to the group, but we're in the middle of a private conversation. Do you mind giving us just a couple minutes and I'll come find you? And then come find that person. Let them know that they're recognized, but this isn't the appropriate time. But what if it's just a group of people? We always have the opportunity to be inclusive simply by taking 1 step back. If we're sitting at a table, pulling 1 chair back to allow them to pull up another chair. Asking for alternative viewpoints purposefully. I mentioned this before. If 5 people have already said the same thing and they're all piggybacking and basically stroking each other's egos that they're all on the same page and they have that affinity bias going, the best question to ask is, does anyone have an opinion that differs from what's been said? Because we don't want to make a decision without having all of the information, and we certainly don't want unintended consequences. And then we'll talk about addressing microaggressions constructively and what microaggressions are. My bonus tip for you today, and if you take this tip with you and it's the only thing you utilize in your daily lives, you will see a huge change in how you interact with other people and the quality of relationships that you build. Listen as if you could be wrong. If you are listening to other person with what you already want to say going on in the back of your mind, then you're not really listening, number 1. And number 2, you could miss something that would change your perspective or could help you understand that person a little bit better and how to have a further discussion. So what is a microaggression? Well, we talked about it at the beginning. When you feel marginalized, someone has treated you or has left you feeling as less than. It's a slight, it's a put down, it's an insult, either purposefully or unconsciously, that people experience in their everyday interactions together. And that might have gone by too quickly. Let me go back 1. It's usually unintended. I want to make sure that people understand most people don't intend to microaggress other people. Some people are bullies, and that's another topic, but microaggressions can occur verbally or non-verbally. And the key piece to this is that people feel ashamed and dehumanized. And keep in mind, it's not your intent as much as it's your impact. And if you want to be inclusive, it's vital that you care about your impact and not just stand on, well, I didn't intend it, therefore I'm not at fault. Well, we can remove fault because the blame game doesn't help anyone. But if we take responsibility and we say, if my intent doesn't match the impact that other people experience, then I have an opportunity to change that. So let's talk about a group of people that consistently are being microaggressed in our society, and that is people who are disabled. This is a great example. I actually have worked with a congressman for our state who is a quadriplegic. He has minimal use of his hands and very, very little mobility otherwise. He is a congressman. He was elected. He's already been elected to another term. He's a brilliant man. And yet when he has an assistant with him who's there to carry books, make sure doors open, assist him just like any other page would, or assistant for a congressperson, people who come up to him will talk to his assistant like he's not capable of having a conversation, or they will shout at him like he's deaf when in fact he's got a physical disability, he's not hearing impaired. There will be people who will run around trying to help him, and it feels very disrespectful without them asking what he needs and if he needs their help. People have leaned on his wheelchair like it's their personal recreational sidearm to sit on. Not okay. Moving equipment when someone is disabled, moving a cane or a crutch without permission has literally rendered that person unable of moving without asking where their crutch or other item went. Sitting at eye level, people in wheelchairs or who are hunched over or have a disability that limits their height, sitting at eye level with them and having a conversation so that they don't have to crane their neck all day. Their necks get tired, and they really appreciate that interaction when they're welcome to a table. People move chairs out of the way so that they can come up to the table, and then sitting at eye level to have a conversation. Introducing yourself to visually impaired people immediately, letting them know where you're standing. If you put your hand out and you've been shaking everyone's hand, put your hand out to the blind person as well and say simply, my hand is at your 3 o'clock, my hand is at your 6 o'clock. Would you like to shake hands? They will appreciate this more than you can ever say. And even where talking, let's say the person is absolutely nonverbal, clearly severely disabled, acknowledging them will also make their caregiver or the person that is spending the majority of their life taking care of that person feel good about the work that they do and the care that they're giving someone who they may be a family member or that they're an employer or an employee of, that this is valuable work and that the person they are serving is being acknowledged as a person. And then here's another piece. Always extend your hand to shake, even if culturally you're not sure it's the right thing to do. And I'm specifically speaking to women in the category of there are some religions and cultures where it is inappropriate for a man to touch a woman. If you don't know and you haven't met them before, it is appropriate to put your hand out, and if they will not shake your hand, being curious instead of offended and saying, oh, tell me more about why, so I can understand. Well, now you've started a conversation, you've shown respect rather than being insulted, and you're giving them an opportunity to share about their culture and to feel like you can still build relationship and acknowledge and respect their boundaries. So highly recommend that rather than taking offense, being curious is always a great step. Now, when we talk about microaggressions, talking over someone, and we are in a lot of meetings, whether you're in your firm and it's your monthly or weekly meeting, you're in a class and you tend to sit in the back of the room so you can chat, and you're on Facebook or social media of some sort or texting instead of engaged in the meeting. This is all a form of microaggression. It's saying what I'm doing is more important than what you're doing, and what I have to say is more important than what you have to say. Talking over someone or interrupting them, which includes finishing their sentences for them. If you have that habit, acknowledge that you just did it. Say, I'm sorry, I did not intend to speak over you. Please finish what you were saying. It's frustrating for people when you're guessing what they're going to say next and you're wrong, but it's also insulting to them that you're hurrying them along, like you know where they're going, and you're not allowing them time to speak to you. If you're present and truly listening, and you happen to do any of these behaviors, acknowledge it. Taking over an idea, I spoke about that. During networking, I mentioned not opening space for someone to step in. That is a microaggression. It says you're not important enough to join the group. Not introducing someone. When we've walked up to a group and the person we know hasn't introduced us to the rest of the group, it is a microaggression. It says to us, again, it may not be intent, but the impact is you're either not important enough for me to introduce you, or I've forgotten who you are and I'm too embarrassed to acknowledge it in front of everyone. So I'm just going to pretend like it's not important to introduce you. If you want to overcome this microaggression, again, doesn't matter intent, it's the impact on the person, then there are a couple ways you can do this. One, you can acknowledge that you don't remember the person's name and say, we've done 3 deals together. I'm on mental pause, obviously, because I can't find your name. I could tell you the streets that we've sold and worked on together, but would you refresh me? I'm so sorry. I will remember it this time. Or if you're with a group of people, you could also say, hey, does everyone know each other? Would you please introduce yourselves if you don't? That takes you off the hook. It's a gracious way that still says, I'm not going to lose this opportunity to make everyone feel welcome, but it doesn't bring attention to yourself in a bigger group that you've forgotten one person's name. So all great things to do, but again, making it more important that that person feels welcome and comfortable, even if you don't like them, than you protecting and saving face. So what's next? Here we are, we're going toward the end of this very fast-paced hour, and I've thrown a lot at you. But if you are relentless about uncovering your unconscious biases and you take action to help others while avoiding being a savior or counselor, finding out if people need help with it, if you see something that isn't cool, if you see a bias occur, can you come up with a constructive way, like the, hey, Mo, I'm not sure, I love where you're going with this, but I'm not sure Mary was finished and I want to make sure I understand her idea. Can we go back to her and then hear what you wanted to add to that? Shows respect for Mo, but again, gives Mary the floor where she really should have been in that situation, without calling Mo out or making him feel ashamed or pushing him away from the conversation. If we are examples and we apologize when necessary, if you are in the middle of speaking and someone is speaking, crosstalk, very common thing. The typical thing is to say, hey, what are you guys talking about? Can you bring it to the whole group? Or I've got the floor, please quit talking. If you set standards at the beginning as the speaker that says, please don't crosstalk, we really want everyone in the group to share ideas. And if you're guilty of crosstalk, put your hand up with the other person, say, I'm sorry, I'm being rude to the speaker. Not we're being rude, I'm being rude to the speaker. And then turn your attention where it belongs. Or, hey, let's talk about this later. I really want to hear what Jane has to say. When you model inclusive behaviors and language, you will start inspiring the people around you to do the same. When you ask questions and explain why you ask, if you have a difficulty, if you don't know if you're handling something appropriately, ask the person that's going to be impacted by it. Is this the best way to do this. If you're inviting someone to be part of a committee, let's say you're creating an inclusive committee and you're inviting them because you want to have a Hindu at the table, let them know, yes, I'm inviting you because we wanted to have this perspective at the table, but I want you to know, out of all of the people that I considered, I felt like you were the right fit because you could bring that perspective, but you're also such a great team player and you communicate well, and I really believe you could add a lot to this conversation. So you're acknowledging the role and the reason that you're inviting them, and that it does have a bias attached, that they are Hindu. But at the same time, you're then saying, in addition, this is the why, but, or this is the who, but the why is much bigger. I want you here because I know how much you can contribute. By slowing the process down and making sure everyone's on board, asking more questions, and if you have a firm or an office or a team, creating inclusive policies, making sure that everything you do treats every single person who comes in your door the same, is going to be very powerful, and it will feel more inclusive to the people that you will be serving as realtors. So reference materials. Right now, NAR has a whole lot of materials that they're creating. I expect more coming. If you have not seen the implicit bias videos that they have, if you haven't seen some of the information that's come out about the changes to the Code of Ethics and why that was voted, it was a 71% decision by the board of directors, and there was a lot of discussion about it. If you want to learn more about it and how to operate with ethics in your daily life, these are all going to be great. And of course, the At Home with Diversity, if you want to be recognized as an inclusive realtor, having those initials and that designation will help you stand out as somebody who is committed to this. And I have a list of books and tapes here. I did not select anything that's specific to racism or any particular protected class. Everything you see here is general in terms of how do you create change? How do you inspire people to participate in that change? What does an inclusive environment look like? You can apply these to your family, to your firm, to your team, to your office, to your association, wherever you are. And my favorite book is, if you're only going to get one, and you can get it as a book on tape if you prefer that, or audiobook. It showed my age right then. The Emotional Intelligence 2.0 is a workbook. It's a great little fast book. You could read a chapter a week and then do the worksheets for a week and just start focusing on one aspect of your emotional intelligence. You could do it as a group, you can do it in your office or on your team, and everyone will start seeing things in a very different light. I love this book, and it is so simple. This is not getting into the depths of all of the social conflict. It's simply, how can I improve how I treat other people, and how can I become more aware of my own unconscious biases and how inclusive I am. So we've talked about these tools you can use. Number one, be curious. Number two, retrain your mind. And number three, recognize individuality. And of course, my favorite, which is the bonus, listen as if you could be wrong. So as a final thought, before we open it up to questions, if anyone has anything that they'd like to ask, my favorite quote is, of course, Thoreau, "It is never too late to give up on your prejudices. Every day we have a chance to improve how we treat other people, how we live our own lives, the quality that we bring to the experience for all of the people we serve and all of the communities that we're a part of." And I encourage you, we need to think independently together. The goal of being inclusive is not to create a watered down version where everyone is afraid of being an individual. Actually, inclusiveness is celebrating every individual and honoring their contribution and inviting them to share that contribution at the table. So I want to thank you for being a part of this conversation today. I know it was a lot in a very short point of time, and we are going to go to questions, and I see, Lori, you're back on. So
Yes, here I am. Thank you so much for sharing this information with us. I realized as we went through that at the beginning, I failed to mention that there is the availability for people to ask questions in the chat box. And a fair number of people have asked if this information is going to be available. And yes, we are recording this, so please do revisit, please share it with your colleagues. A couple questions that we received here. One is, let me look at it here, from one of our past presidents who's been really instrumental in Maryland Realtors DEI efforts. And that is it unreasonable to expect that if a person denies bias or racism, the existence of bias or racism, that they would ever get to a place of empathy?
that they would get to a place of what?
Empathy.
Yes, I'm going to say that I have met some people who are very rigid in their thinking, who have had conversations with me, and I'm actually, I want to say, pen pals through Messenger with people who have changed, and also people who have had a lot of limited experience. If they've had a very small community, they tend to believe that racism doesn't exist only because they haven't experienced it in their own lives and they haven't seen it firsthand. And what you see on the news or in social media isn't necessarily relevant until it comes closer to home. So creating opportunities for empathy might be inviting people in from different cultures or other associations like the Hispanic Association, the LGBT. I always get these initials wrong. The Realists, the Black African American Realtor Association. It's either, is it REBAC?
It's the National Association of Real Estate Brokers.
NAREB, yes, thank you. So any of those opportunities to bring in different points of view and sharing common information gives people a chance to grow empathy. If they have no experience, they're not going to be able to grow. So part of our goal as leaders, I believe, is creating opportunities for alternative experiences and hearing from differing points of view in a very constructive setting. So I hope that's helpful.
Yes, and a couple people have asked the name, if you could just repeat for us the name of the book that you mentioned, the emotional intelligence one. I've read that one, it's really outstanding.
Yes, it's basically Emotional Intelligence 2.0, and it has questions at the end of each chapter. You can do it with the audiobook as well.
Excellent. And then I think another point that would be useful to touch on, given NAR's recent code of ethics change, is what would your advice or input be for realtors who see this type of behavior happening on social media? I mean, we've all seen it. Everyone has seen a colleague or a friend even make a comment that it could range from being insensitive to being, flat out inappropriate. But a lot of times people are scared to speak up in those cases. They don't want to risk the relationship. They don't want to, make waves. So what are some ways that people can do that in a sensitive and tactful way?
Well, I would say that the biggest key to this is to know the person and assume a good motive, and doing it offline. If it's big enough, let's say it's an officer of, a board member, you're going to have a different set of criteria where you would have the president reach out, or the AE if the president had conflict with that particular person and didn't feel that they could be effective. But reaching out privately is always the best thing. I have a friend who had posted something that was very, very political. She's on the board. I happen to have rolled off that board, but I sent her a note and just said, hey, not sure if you realize how this is it might be perceived. Again, it's not intent, it's impact. Are we making some of our members feel less valued or marginalized because we're expressing a point of view that cuts out half the population? And so my note to her was, hey, I know you didn't intend this, but I think people are not going to respond, but I'm sure a lot of people are going to take this the wrong way. And as a board member, you know, we put on that hat that says we care about all our members. Could you pull that down? And she said, oh my gosh, just forgot. I was so upset about this topic and I didn't really think about it. Thank you for pointing it out. She pulled it down. There are other people who could be offended, and impact would be the opportunity to get past offense. Let's say they don't want to take it down, then they're going to die on that hill, right? Because at some point, if we're compassionate toward them, if we show empathy and say, I don't know if you realize this, but people are complaining to XYZ, or I am concerned that this is going to harm you. If we have each other's backs and we're coming from a, I don't think you meant this. We have a mechanism in place with the new code of ethics that is not intended to be this big brother looking in everybody's posts and trying to find fault. This is a tool that needed to happen when people have egregious behavior that is absolutely unacceptable. And most realtors would say, I don't want them to even be affiliated with us. We did not have a mechanism to remove them from our association or to file a complaint with our real estate commissions. Now we do. If a firm can say, this is egregious, we don't want anybody on our team who's going to say this is a no end zone. For example, the recent gentleman in Arizona who was videotaped saying that several times, who was a realtor. He wasn't practicing real estate at the time, but I think most of us would say that's not someone we want representing what we do in our association. The association had no right to remove him. The firm let him go, but all he had to do was take his firm to another, or his license to another firm, and he's fine. And this is the other piece that I think is really important to understand. Even though he was arrested, the odds of him actually being prosecuted because he did not commit a crime, a racially motivated crime requires a crime as well. Racism in itself, saying racial slurs, is not against the law, as everyone knows. That's free speech. But if he had done a crime along with it, then he would have probably had further legal consequences. In this situation, he basically was rude on a video and his firm let him go, but his association couldn't, not at the local or the state level, nor at the national level. So part of this code of ethics is about setting standards. Can you possibly be non-discriminatory if you have hate language about a protected class in our code of ethics on your social media page? And if you believe you can, I don't. I think most thinking people would agree, if you have a judgment about an entire group of people, it's going to be impossible to represent them fairly or treat them fairly, because you will have unconscious bias. So the fear of free speech notwithstanding, in an association, we can set standards that the board of directors, which are selected from all over the country and sat and for weeks went over this stuff and made the decision at 71%. That means 29% of the people didn't agree with this decision. So there's work to be done there. And there's also compassion for the people that didn't vote for it, not because they're racist. I believe most people who voted against it were concerned about freedom of speech and privacy. And they were genuinely concerned with an overreach. So I would say to those people, if you see examples where there is overreach or it is being used in a manipulative or competitive way to try to destroy someone's business unfairly, bring that to the attention of the board of directors at the national level, and they will work on this. This is an ongoing process.
That's excellent. Thank you. So we've really kind of reached the end of our time. I'll just reiterate for the folks who have written in additional questions that yes, this is being recorded. The implicit association tests, I think those are available from a variety of different colleges. And if you just Google that topic, you should be able to come up with those.
Yes.
This webinar will be available shortly, posted on the Maryland Realtors website. And also on the Maryland Realtors website, you'll find a diversity resources page, and our fair housing page has been filled out with a lot of videos. We'll find the Newsday, link to the Newsday study on there, as well as a lot of books. So we've been filling out those resources for our members. So again, I really appreciate your time today. I appreciate you sharing this with our members. And again, thank you so much for taking the proceeds from these presentations and giving back to the realtor community.
It's my pleasure. It's been an honor to speak with Maryland Realtors. I'm sorry I didn't get to see anyone in person, but I'm really thrilled that we had an opportunity to share this information today. And Lori, you can also share my information. My email is on there, my phone number's on there, and I'm certainly open and welcome to hearing from anyone who wants to discuss anything further.
Perfect. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Well, thank you both. Thank you, Lori, for hosting this, and thank you, Cher. This has been a wonderful presentation. I did send you a text, and I'm hoping you can just email me your book list, because people have been very fascinated by that, and I'd like to share your book recommendations, like a Cher Powers reading list for our members, and giving full credit to you for that wonderful curated list. Thank you, everybody, for attending. Have a great holiday season. This is our last webinar for 2020. And we will be back on January 14th with our Senior Vice President, Bill Castelli, as he provides a legislative preview going into 2021. Thank you all. Thank you again, Cher. Thank you again, Lori. And have a great day, everybody, at Maryland Realtors. Bye.
Bye.